messed up, don't we? Some of the terminology that's in it. Um, oops. Oh, there we go. I've had those slides. I thought I was going to read those. Okay, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. So that is something to always, I think we fail in this a lot because I've always tried to tell, like my boys and others, is how would it feel if someone was to do that to you? And I've also said this to Christians. When you say something, how would it feel if somebody told you that the way you said it? And it's how you say it. And this is why it's so important, because it puts, see, selfish is the way the world has taken this golden rule, and it's almost do unto others before they can do it to you. You know, they pervert and change this, and that's what's so unique about Christianity is you're putting others first. You're considering them before you act. And that's something that we should always remember, is that what do you want from others? How do you want others to treat you if you make a mistake? You know, and I know that's hard sometimes to remember this, but it's really something important. Now, so if this is really, if you go back again, I said, you know, everything that God is teaching us to conduct ourselves like in our behavioral mannerisms and such, they're selfish, they're selfless, they're selfless. They're always putting others first before we put ourselves. So all of those sins that we look at, in the Ten Commandments even, they're really about considering others first and not myself. Because if I covet, I'm considering wanting something that's not mine. It's somebody else's. If I commit adultery, then I am taking something that's not mine and injuring somebody else. You know, if I lie, I am injuring somebody else. All of those are about me, and they always injure the other party. So all those specific sins, he says, look what he says there. This is the law and the prophets. If you couldn't remember any of the thou shalt nots, so you never were taught the thou shalt nots. You don't do this, and don't do this, and this is a sin, and this is a sin, and you focused on, honestly, how would you want to be treated? Now, if you're evil in the core, you're going to have a whole different value system. I mean, I understand that. But in human nature, we want to be treated a certain way. But the irony is, we don't treat others the same way, do we? And so that hangs judgment. Because when we are doing this, we're also a hypocrite. I need to apologize. I don't have my social media up or my notes, so I can't see who's with me this morning. So if the Haynes, you're there, good morning. But I can't see the social mix that we use. So, but I do see them afterwards. If you do add to them and you're online, you have comments. So when you read 12 and then you go to 13 and 14, how did those relate? This is where, you know, it's like, okay, well, the golden rule by itself could be its own idea, which it is, but we can't just stop there. I mean, when we look at the verses that he's talking about, you know, we have to understand that there's still one thought being given here. And so when he brings in this idea, the law and the prophets, it's really then linking towards this idea of almost the speck in the beam again, looking at judgment, condemnation. And so, and our biggest failures is to consider others when we're acting or interacting with others. Yes. Yeah, I want to read that. So since we don't have the mic, that's very good, Becky. I'm glad. I was going to 13, but I'm glad you do that because you remind me as well sometimes. Becky brought up Romans 13:8, which is really the same thing. And I love the way he says this because it really is saying the same thing, isn't it, in a different way. So now we have this as being taught by Jesus, the golden rule. But look over here in Romans 13, starting in 8. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another hath fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not murder, commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. And I like the way it says, besides this, know the time, the hour has come for you to wake up. Pay attention. So Paul being a Pharisee, and the Pharisees were very literal, and they looked at the letter of the law, and it's important as a lawyer. I mean, you can't generalize. You have to have a specific ordinance or whatever the law is labeled, Smith versus U.S. or thing. Yeah, it's very specific, and they quote them a lot of times. And so to me, it's almost looking at a Pharisee as he's saying this, Paul, and he starts out listing them for the commandments. And then he lists adultery, murder, steal, covet. And then I like the way he's just sort of like, and any other commandment. A Pharisee would have kept going. You can almost see that, but he's using it as an illustration, but it also shows really the maturity of this previous Pharisaical heart of Paul. That even Paul starts to see and understand that it's not really about the adultery, the murder, and Jesus even taught it earlier in the Sermon on the Mount. Where's it at? It's in the heart. It's in our heart where it starts. And so that's what he said. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. It's about the spiritual level that we're engaging is showing that love. And just remember, God so loved the world that gave his only begotten son. Yet while we were still sinners and enemies, he loved us. And so that our salvation is summed up in one word, love. Well, Jesus Christ, but isn't it love? We love. And man, if we honestly, I mean, people are like misunderstanding the idea of selfishness versus selflessness. And we see that, and I think it's I don't know, sin roots itself inside of those feelings. Were you going to say something, Becky? Oh, I thought you were going to add something else. Okay. And so it's such a good practice. One, think before you speak. And while you're thinking before you speak, think this one as well. How would I respond to what I'm fixing to do or say? How would I respond if somebody come up and called me a liar? How would I respond if someone accused me of something and did it in a very negative or hateful way? Not that they couldn't say that I lied or something, but it's all about the approach. I think you said that. That's what you're saying. It's about not necessarily the truth in it. It's more than that, isn't it? Is it kind? What's that rule? Is it kind? Is it useful? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it useful? Is it helpful? I heard my son Ryan saying that to his kids the whole time he was down here. When they do something, I loved it. When he was disciplining them, he'd look at them and they would be fighting or something, and he'd say, "Is it kind? Was that useful? Was that helpful? Then why'd you say it? Why'd you do it?" Right? It's a very powerful. I think that fits in with this. We just so many times, and I know I've done it, but it's not necessarily the information, but it's the way that we present it. It's not necessarily that the action doesn't need to be taken, but it's the way we approach. If we would just be considerate. Now, there's also the other side, in John 14:15, where Jesus says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." But if you're loving him, you're going to do his commandments. And then what? The commandments aren't burdensome. You don't go around thinking about, "Oh boy, I hope I don't murder somebody. Oh boy, I hope I don't kill, I hope I don't cheat today. Hope I don't steal something today." Why? Because you love somebody. And you love somebody who owns that thing in which you would steal. And if you love that person, you won't steal their things. If you love somebody, you're not going to murder them. If you love somebody, you won't do those things that are sinful, that the law judges. And so you don't go around worrying about, "Oh man, I come close to murdering. I come close to this. I come close to this sin. I come close to this sin." And that's why I love bringing, John 14:15 here. "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." But that's going to be easy to do, like what Jesus says here. This idea that if we consider others and do them first, then that's going to take care of it. And then Paul ties in with Romans 13, and we just said the fulfillment of it all the law is just in love. If we just learn to love, just think of all the conflict that have probably happened in your congregation in the past, just among Christians. And I think about them, and the ones that I've heard from many congregations, and some of the things that Christians can do to one another is appalling. It's appalling, isn't it? And I just cannot believe sometimes that we're as bad as we are as Christians, that we do not stop and consider what we say. And the excuse sometimes, is, "Well, that's just the way they are. They don't have tact, but they just speak the truth and stuff." And it's like, I go back to that idea again. Is it kind? Is it helpful? And how are you doing it? How would that person like to be spoke to that way? Oh, I think it would incite them. Some people that I know that were like that, they would fire off at the hip and say some things like that. If I was to speak to them like that, but they don't think about it. And that's why this is so important for us to be able to grab. If you can grasp this one thing, you will get to heaven. Think about that. Just this one thing. If you can get this golden rule into practice, I can guarantee you'll get to heaven. So, even if you don't know anything else about the Bible, if you never read the Bible again, but you could do this, of course, you're in a relationship with Jesus Christ, you are saved, you've had your sins forgiven, and you're dealing with them, but this is so simple, isn't it? It just seems too simple. It's just, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. And that ties in what Jesus said. If you love me, you'll do my commandments, what Paul just said. Okay. Why does 13 then come in? Because the failure of this drives us towards an eternal destination, doesn't it? So enter in by the narrow gate. So he gives the idea, we've heard this over and over, we've probably all, if you've been a Christian 10 seconds, you probably have heard this lesson on this. Enter in by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter in by it are many, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few. I think this also, there's a part here where it's not easy to practice that golden rule. It's not easy, but it's important because look what he said, law and the prophets hang on this. Then he goes into this idea that there's a part of the theme of these 13 and 14, I think, is that it's going to be imperative because you're going to go down you're going to enter one of these gates. And those who can master this golden rule are going to be able to be the few that are going to go into the narrow gate. Wide's the world gate. I like that. I think, that's important. I never really linked kind of what you're saying is the idea, but look at, that's the easy way. That's the world way, Becky's saying, is the wide gate. It's just, and that's where it kind of ties what I was saying is that's so natural, isn't it? It is so natural. You don't have to do anything. Just be like the world, be like your old person. And you're not going to be doing to others what you want done to you. You're going to be doing to others what you want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's why, isn't it interesting how verse 12 here can get just ripped off from this? That's where we talk about context, where within the conversation and what he's speaking. And too often we've just taken chapter 12 and preached sermon on 12, over and over, golden rule. But we don't understand that the breaking of that golden rule, the failure of us to obtain that ability to perform the golden rule, it's an eternal destiny that hangs on it. And that's what he does say, because look, for this is the law and the prophets. So what is that? That's judgment if we go against it. So all of that is summed up in that. And so it also shows that not everyone's saved, right? There's a lot of good people. There's a lot of good people that do good things, but at the same time, they still violate this golden rule. They're not considerate of others. They may do other kind things, but again, it doesn't matter. That's our foundation that we build upon, that if we could just grasp. So the easy way, just continue to live like you are. Just respond the way the world responds. And that's the problem, is the sinful world has conditioned us to respond the way that it responds and interact with it. But we are not the old. We are new. We are new creatures in Christ. The old man is gone, crucified. The one who would do what he wanted in spite of what others wanted, now we're more considerate. We're more loving. And so that old man, if you don't, it's interesting. I just thought of this. If you don't destroy that old man, guess what? You're going to go down the gate that leads to destruction. The old man is good. The old man is going to be destroyed one way or another, right? We either do it, we either destroy the old man and become like Christ, or God through judgment, like he's saying here. And it's work. It's not easy. And God, what I love about this is Jesus is acknowledging that it's not easy on our own. We cannot do it on our own. It has to come from Jesus Christ himself. I don't really I want to kind of spend more time than we really have on looking at Matthew 15 and 18. So I think I'm going to wrap up there. And so I hope you'll go ahead and read because he's still talking, but he's still in the Sermon on the Mount, but he is starting to wrap up the Sermon on the Mount. Well, I hope this morning you were able to enjoy the lesson and drop your comments or concerns or questions in the comments on YouTube or Facebook will come to me. And this morning at 10:45, we have worship. This afternoon at 4 p.m., we have worship again. And then midweek is 6 p.m. So I hope to see you soon. Until then, God bless. You know, they're easy and they're so hard. I Yes.